So I am petrified of lightning. I'm absolutely convinced that one day I'm going to be walking down the street, minding my own business, and boom, or is it flash? And that's going to be the end of me. A very good day to you. I'm Howard Feldman, and this is Synthesis TV.
This is Synthesis TV, keeping you on the edge of technology and business.
Joining me in studio today is Michael Grant. He's the CTO of Synthesis Software Technologies, and he, like me, has a bizarre interest. The only difference is I just am fearful about lightning. He's actually studied it. And would you believe that he has his PhD in lightning? That's just honestly the weirdest thing I've ever heard. Michael, why? Well, first of all, good day. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thanks, Howard. And I think my fascination with lightning comes from a very similar space to your fear, because
Really?
it sort of started when I was up on this mountain in Bolivia, just after I had graduated my undergrad. And I felt this like strange tingling sensation in my arm. And there was this noise around me, like the crushing of an ice cube in a vise. And I lifted my ice axe up and I could like see these little streamers emanating from the tip of this ice axe. And what followed was like the most terrifying 8 hours, where this big blizzard had come over and we had to dig into a snow hole. But that was like the terror moment that sort of initiated the fascination into the phenomenon for me.
Wow. So were you almost struck by lightning? Is that what this was? Or you were? What did that mean, this tingling thing?
So just before lightning strikes, you actually have this upward streamer that emanates typically from sharp points in the local area. And what I was feeling were was the current that leads to these streamers. So as I lifted my ice axe up, I was deforming the electric field, and so the tip of the ice axe was pushing electrons into space. And I could feel that current, the streamer current.
Wow.
What I was very lucky, is that streamer didn't connect to the downward leader. And it's when those two connect, at this moment we call it attachment. And that's when the lightning current flows, and we as humans can see this very bright flash. So what was happening is that around me, lots of other things were also releasing streamers. And so it actually hit the peak of the mountain that I was trying to climb, some distance away, luckily, but still enough for me to feel the streamer.
Unbelievable. So how does lightning actually work?
It takes a hell of a lot of effort. So the first thing that's got to happen is you've got to separate charge. And so it turns out water molecules are really good for creating this sort of static separation. You have convection, and the convection moves these little ice crystals around the cloud, and as they bump into each other, they strip off electrons. And depending on how cold they are, they can also deposit electrons. And so you end up with this very like Big Mac type structure with layers of positive charge and negative charge and positive charge. And you have this big electrified thunder cell. Now, in the high felts in Johannesburg, you see these big, imposing gray clouds, and you've got this deep convection creating these layers of separation. But here down in the Western Cape, we don't have that deep convection because we've got a nice cold ocean, and so we don't actually get that lightning, which is maybe a...
So is that true of many coastal towns?
Correct. And in fact, so what dominates is the colder oceans. So typically the South African west coast is much colder, and it doesn't have that deep convection. But like the Seychelles and Mauritius that have this warmer Indian Ocean, they have a huge amount of lightning, because it's energy into the atmosphere that leads to the separated charge. And then you've got this like very pregnant thundercloud, and you just need a condition to initiate the start of lightning. And here is one of the points where we don't actually know.
Right.
So we don't actually know what starts it. We have some competing theories. We think cosmic rays could play a part. We also think maybe rolling of the dice could play a part.
What do you mean? It's random, totally random?
We think so, right? There's this like, we know what leads to the conditions in a thunder cell just before lightning, and we're well versed in what happens when lightning strikes. But this actual like moment of initiation, we've got a whole bunch of theories, and we're busy testing it, but it's anyone's guess at this
Did
stage.
anybody look in your studies at this whole Judeo-Christian thing with like lightning being coming from God as retribution? Is that part of one of the things that you looked at? Probably not.
I mean, this
right?
is why I'm so terrified of lightning, right?
No, because it's interesting because there's something very mythical, really, and about lightning, isn't there? We've seen it. As I said, part of Judeo-Christian culture, the Greeks, and lightning has played a role in our storytelling and our fears forever.
And how this is maybe one of the most beautiful commonalities between almost every religion around the world, is the presence of a deity that can control lightning. There are Taoist incantations of it, there are Buddhist incantations of it, and folk have spent a deep amount of time sort of trying to understand the psyche that leads to these beliefs. And it's a beautiful sort of like interwoven part of human tapestry that speaks to lightning. Yeah.
That's very, very interesting. When we talk about a bolt of lightning, sort of out the blue, what does that mean?
So what can happen is we've got these thunder cells, and the start of lightning has happened, and then you've got this leader mechanism, and it sort of jumps forward a couple of 100 meters, and then it pauses, and the current from the charge center flows to the tip of the lightning leader, and it waits for a few milliseconds, and then it shoots forward the next little jump. And this mechanism can actually cover a huge amount of ground, not just from the cloud to ground or from cloud to cloud, but it can just keep going from cloud into air, into air, into air, into air. And we've recorded lightning leaders as long as 180 kilometers. Now, when I look at the horizon, I sort of see maybe 25 kilometers. So if I was on the unfortunate end of this 180 kilometer long leader, it would look like a bolt from the blue. They are thankfully.
But in fact, really what's happened is it's come from very far away, but it's traveled all the way through that distance.
Precisely right. Yeah.
Very, very, very interesting. So what?
Good question.
So, yeah, it's fascinating. We live in fear. I live in fear. But why would we study lightning?
It's a good question. So I think the first part of it is folk often think that we can capture lightning. But lightning is a transient phenomenon that's very short in time. And so the statistic is that if I had to capture all the lightning in the world for a year, I couldn't actually power Johannesburg for 60 seconds because it is so brief. It's sort of like microseconds long. So that's 10 to the minus 6. And if I stack all of those up together, I don't even get 1 minute of enough electricity to power Joburg. So even if we could harness lightning and store it perfectly, unfortunately, there isn't enough energy there. So we have power and then we have energy. And that's the difference between the two that really yields that portion. But this very fast phenomenon can cause a lot of damage. And so studying lightning matters from a protection perspective, protection against loss of property, and then also protection against the loss of life. It is quite important to say that lightning deaths, luckily, are quite few, but they are entirely preventable against. So if you follow a bit of common sense, and the lovely phrase is when thunder roars, go indoors. But if you follow that, you're generally safe. But from a loss of property perspective, insurers in the Highveld, for example, hate this because there's hundreds of millions of rands of claims in terms of lost electronic equipment that's been damaged by lightning and so forth. So you can protect against it quite effectively, and then that's really why it matters.
Right. And in terms of, so what did you study in your PhD? What area did you focus on?
So I was quite interested with the actual physics of the phenomenon itself, and what would lead to the initiation of lightning. And I started out by trying to fire rockets into thunderclouds to trigger lightning and measure it. And in this pursuit, I came across a very large data set that recorded where lightning was striking, when, and how energetic it was. And I applied some really novel data science techniques, and I found this beautiful phenomenon or beautiful pattern that gave us this insight into the phenomenon, particularly with, and it seems pretty intuitive now when you say it, but the more frequently lightning is striking, the weaker the lightning bolts are. And this sort of speaks to a limit in terms of energy transfer. And it turns out that it's about 800 watts per square meter, which is about the amount of energy that comes from the sun. And that's a sort of like, if lightning strikes a lot, it's quite weak. And if it's infrequent, it's quite strong.
Can lightning hit the same place twice? What was that?
Many times.
Lightning never strikes twice. Is that rubbish?
Yeah, it is indeed. So lightning hits things quite frequently. And so if it's been hit once, it's going to be hit again.
So where do we get this nonsense from?
To
make ourselves feel better.
And like my grandmother, and I love her dearly, will cover her mirror with a rug.
Yes. What is that?
It can bounce off, and that's our visual examination of the phenomenon. It's so bright that anything shiny looks like it is in fact carrying lightning. And so there's, again, like tied into this tapestry of the human narrative is this a lot of folklore around lightning, and unfortunately a lot of it is superstitious. And I'm only a little stitious, so I use science to unpack it.
And being near an open window, an uncovered window.
Yeah, exactly. So windows or anything that sort of exposes you to the flow of electrical current. So you don't want to take a bath, you don't want to be in the shower, you want to be indoors, away from plugs, away from wiring, and then you're really super safe. Like inside a metallic car, where lightning could flow around the outside of the car, you'd be very safe.
Interesting. But then, so lightning can come through a window.
Correct. So let's say there is
whether the curtains are open or not.
Correct. Yeah, it'll go through the glass without worrying. But if there is some metallic conductor, it would choose to flow through that metallic conductor.
Right. And you've already said cars are safe because of the metal surround. What about an aeroplane? I've been in a number of times, actually, in a plane where we were struck by lightning, the first time out of New York. And what happened, we were hit, we could feel it. The lights went out, but everything just carried on. So it was more scary than it was anything else. But we actually doesn't seem to be, aside from the lights going out, any consequence.
Exactly right. And I think every commercial passenger airline experiences about 2 direct lightning strikes a year.
Oh,
that's on average. Yeah,
right.
It's totally fine because the engineers have put these conductive surfaces in. So it's typically an aluminium body, and then they've got these conductors within it that can move the electric charge, typically from front to back or wingtip to wingtip.
What about lightning has led you to being CTO of a software company?
Howard, it's a curiosity. It was looking at this data that I had a huge amount of data. Any sort of like naive investigation wouldn't show you anything new, but it was a curiosity in the way in which I was folding the data and just sort of pulling a thread, a sort of pursuit of something unknown. And I love to think that technology is almost the same. There is so much unknown. And what I love doing is applying my mind to try and understand it and make it personable and understandable to those around me. And I think that is what's so crucial to me helping technology folk be successful. Is technology often seems magical or hidden or inaccessible, but it isn't quite. You just got to pull that thread and look beyond.
So here's the thing. Are you more frightened or less frightened by lightning now that you've got your PhD in it?
I'm actually terrified, but that's still...
So it didn't help. So a little bit of knowledge or a lot of knowledge is actually sometimes a very dangerous thing, right?
Oh, totally right.
That's so interesting. So in other words, you want more respect for it.
Absolutely. And I think sort of in the pursuit of the study, I've seen some of the damage that it has done, like blown apart trees, huge holes in tarred surfaces where there were services that were underneath it. So there was a big water pipe, and this positive lightning strike had hit the ground and had gouged out a massive hole just from the explosion, the steam explosion from that lightning current.
So here's always a question. I know that you say when thunder roars, go indoors, but sometimes you can't. Sometimes you're walking somewhere, you are outdoors. Many people in South Africa in particular don't have the privilege of getting into their own cars and driving. And they have no choice. They're out there, and all of a sudden a storm, a thunder, as you said, a high-felt thunderstorm comes over. It is intuitive to walk under a tree because you're not going to get as wet. But we were told not to. What is the best plan of action caught in a storm that is scary?
Good question. So Howard, there is something known as the lightning safety position. It's where you crouch on your haunches.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be in things like caves. You do not want to be underneath a tree.
Wait, you don't want to be in a cave?
No, you don't want to be in a cave because the lightning
That's
flash.
the first place I would have run to. Not
correct.
Out there. What do you mean? Why not?
Because lightning will actually jump over the mouth of the cave, and if you are standing near the mouth of the cave, you can be hit. You can become part of that lightning.
Okay, fine. So we don't want to go be in a cave, right?
Correct. So
and you don't want to be under a tree.
You don't want to be on a ridge. Don't want to be under a tree. You don't want to be on the edge of a lake. You don't want to be on a boat. You sort of want to be out in a nice plain, away from structures that would be slightly higher, more likely for lightning to attach onto, and you want to be crouched down on your haunches. Typically want to cross your arms over your chest as well if you can.
Why would you do that?
So when the lightning phenomenon, if you're unlucky to be hit, you really want to minimize the amount of current that goes across your heart, because it's
in other words, you're taking it and you're actually almost creating a bit of a barrier.
Precisely right. In a high frequency phenomenon, so you keep it out of your chest cavity.
If you are on a boat,
you really don't want to be on a boat, particularly a sailboat with a nice tall mast.
Oh gosh, yes, there's that.
It's very dangerous. Correct.
I just want you to know, Michael, that you have totally worked me up now. I thought that this was going to be a very calming experience, and the knowledge that you imparted would actually have placated me a little bit, but I'm actually feeling quite hysterical right now.
So there are a couple of things you can think of, right? And the weather apps.
None of them
really
include Zainul, huh?
Right. And you just want to think about like when you could potentially be exposed to the phenomenon, and it's just a little bit of forethought.
Right. Never go on a boat.
Where could you be? Never get on a boat ever.
Never ever get on a boat. Never ever get into a cave.
Never have a bath.
Always stay indoors.
Nothing.
Right, I think I got it. Michael Grant, CTO of Synthesis Software Technologies, joining us this afternoon on Synthesis TV, talking about his somewhat strange and questionable interest in lightning, but fascinating nevertheless. I hope you found it as interesting as I did. You have a great day, and we'll catch you next time on Synthesis TV.